and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Chief Architect Forum News. My name is Kevin Donovan. With me, as usual, Bryce Ominski. How you doing, Bryce?
Doing great today, Kevin. Some interesting pre-podcast discussions, and I
As
think,
always.
as always, the big news this week is NVIDIA, with their announcements and bringing out their new chip line, but also really looking at performance increases in the Blackwell Ultra GPU series as it becomes more entrenched. And so this is going to, I think, mean a lot to the industry. Our second story, we're going to talk a little bit about Gemini. And then third, we're going to wrap up what it all means. So going into the Blackwell series, I think, we're seeing, quite a change actually. Blackwell, we've got the new series that they've introduced right now. I think we're really seeing a lot of growth there that people may be underestimating.
Yeah, it's the numbers look amazing. And as you mentioned, kind of, may be getting to have real consequence for how people architect solutions. This Blackwell Ultra on that DJX, 800 gigabytes per second local area network. That's going to be exposing a lot of processing power. And yeah, you're going to, probably want that power with as little latency as you can possibly get it too. So yeah, you're going to have to kind of be reassessing your infrastructure, not to mention your energy consumption, cooling, powerful GPUs.
Yeah, I think there's I think 5 things that we've looked at that are going to change directly with this increased power and the adoption from practical applications. I think first, you're getting accelerated AI workloads as you go forward. So you're getting better inferences, probably more thorough and quicker inferences for things like data analytics. 2, overall, you're enhancing your data center performance. I can't imagine that nobody wants, or let me put it this way, nobody wants slower performance. Everybody wants faster performance. So I don't see us somehow losing demand for these chips, as we go forward. It's a different type of computing. People want more. You start to go to advanced workstation capabilities. So now we can actually do, I think as you get more powerful, you also enable different types of qualitative reasoning around things like simulations and stuff like that. We start to look at enhanced IT infrastructure. So I think we're going to see, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, but this idea now that there's going to be a difference in my architectures between cloud APIs that maybe leverage Blackwell from remote data centers, where you have very poor performance on the network sending messages, versus applications that are going to require much better performance, and actually start looking at on-prem or close by data centers to enhance the connectivity of everything. And I think we're actually going to see some real changes in the way we architect for artificial intelligence going forward. We're seeing that some of the current network technologies, for instance, TCP is probably not going to cut the mustard. In general, we'll talk about this a bit later. Things like enterprise application integration approaches probably aren't going to work as well as direct, mind melds between the data sources and data transfer and stuff like that. So very exciting changes. I think to really understand the business trend, it's really going to be like, I think we've got a vision now. If somebody wanted to sit down and do this, it's like, here's what we're going to enable. Now, what are the business use cases that enables? I think there's probably a clear answer there.
Yeah, good points that it'll change kind of the way that you approach even solutioning. Currently, this Blackwell, it's an upgrade, but there's going to be a cumulative effect that's going to force an architectural shift.
Yes.
Energy management, consumption, cooling solutions, if it's in your data center, but also, where are you placing these this compute?
And that brings up the second point, Kevin.
More and more important.
And that really brings up the second point, which I think is really that you're kind of alluding to now. When you look at some of the advances, with the Gemini chip, what they're doing, enhanced workstations. Again, they're definitely focused on, improved content creation, better information consumption with their audio, features that they're adding to it. I would almost call that API kind of like reasoning light, like a different type of reasoning, right? And you're probably still going to want better integrations. Don't get me wrong, but the idea of going to the cloud for certain workloads will make sense, whereas other ones like may have to go on premise or even closer towards the edge, right? Like for performance reasons.
Yeah. Oh, I think definitely. Yeah. Especially, anything audio, you need a very low latency. But even very, data and compute intensive digital twin simulations, as you mentioned, that sort of thing. That's all going to require very high performance and very low latency.
Absolutely. And then so flipping this around a little bit, like what does the architect of the future have to look forward to? I mean, there's going to be some really big changes. I think the first change is going to be how do I communicate between these, systems of intelligence in a very efficient way? So does HTTPS-based APIs cut it? Probably not so much. We're going to need stuff that, improves parallelism and supports more maybe direct data sharing, I think is the first change we're going to see, especially for some of these on-prem systems.
Mm.
Um,
Aid sharing, yeah, I mean, just different integration strategies in general, I would assume.
well, exactly. So, I mean, if, you're looking at, say, like something over HTTPS in the past, right? Now, I think there's going to be, we're going to probably look at, well, one way will be rather than doing something like APIs and microservices over HTTPS, we'll be looking at something a little bit more direct. There's things like the quick protocol that might replace the transport mechanism that you have with HTTPS, for instance, right? And so you might be looking at the quick protocol to be used more often. We may be looking at more direct memory sharing. So rather than building a microservice which wraps up database changes and then passes it to another microservice, and you have those layers in the middle, for performance, we may start to look at direct memory mind melt kind of technologies becoming more popular, right? I think the third thing that happens here, which is very interesting, is this idea now that, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Now we have to look, say, at a microservice. So I encapsulate my AI on premise, maybe close to the edge with a container. And now I'm looking at performance around that container as I deploy it on my local environment. And so that means as an architect of the microservices, if I follow that approach, I better be aware and understand the underlying performance of my chip infrastructure and what that means. And I think that's a huge change because in the past, that underlying infrastructure performance was pretty much decoupled from the integration architecture. Now, I think it's much more tightly coupled, maybe not in terms of code, but certainly in terms of your processing power decisions, right? And what does that actually mean going forward? I think that's going to be a huge change for architects. Um, it's really interesting. It's almost like, you're going to have to understand in advance a little bit more what you need, right? Order it in, put it on premise, as opposed to just going to the cloud and doing everything.
Yeah. Yeah. The cloud architect role will grow in importance, and they'll need to be involved earlier and earlier as you plan out the workloads and where they're going to be executed, for sure.
So I think you're also going to see architectures where you have a real assignment of some of these chips for specific purpose, like, or, technologies. Like, for instance, I could see something like, Google's Gemini API being available for lightweight applications through the cloud that don't really need high performance as much as something on-prem. On the flip side, I could see people paying for the, on-premise Blackwell kind of clusters to get high performance results, or and then pushing things towards the edge also. And then you start to get special protocols as we start to look at these high performance things. Like NVIDIA has special, network models that they can use to accelerate data transfer. And so we're going to be starting to get a real question of when do you go on the backplane to transfer data versus on the main network kind of thing.
Right. Right. Yeah. High frequency trading leaps to mind. Porn usually, pushes a lot of advances on the internet. I'm not sure that it's going to be the top use case here, but who knows?
What does that involve exactly, Kevin?
Porn.
I
Pornography
thought,
usually,
sorry. No,
is the
I thought
harbinger
you said
of
something else there. Sorry, Kevin. That, well, I mean, that's caused a lot of the, a lot of the early advances in the internet, was swamped with young men, typically wanting to access images. And it's interesting now, there's a lot of this fake technology coming forward. You can almost do an entire movie with AI right now, right? Which is kind of scary, like in terms of the ability to fake things. And yeah, that's.
Yeah, the examples just get better and better and better.
I think though that when we start to look at this stuff, I actually think we're probably moving past the era of sort of static artifacts like videos and stuff like that don't change, like producing them, and moving much more towards things like dynamic analytics and applications that require dynamic learning. And I think that's going to be very interesting. And I would also suggest that a lot of these ideas like faster backplanes for communications, improved network speed, are really going to also benefit other types of computing going forward. Like for instance, quantum computing, as we get faster, bigger results. I think we're also going to be very interested in the integration side on how we can connect those results. So I think right now integration is one of the most exciting areas to be looking at with a lot of these changes, and really points out this necessity to understand the core principles behind integration. I don't think you can just go and say, I'm going to take a vendor technology today, because I think in a year it will be obsolete. You need to know enough of the fundamentals to leverage what's happening there.
Yeah. How is your course going, by the way? I mean, do you have to rip up like the last 4 lessons and rewrite, or
well, that's actually a great question, Kevin. Course is going great. We've started the integration course, and as you know, it does offer going into the foundational principles. And I would say actually it's interesting because there's a few modules that talk about intelligent system integration, and I would say that they're pretty much done. I wouldn't say they're major revisions, but yeah, with some of this news, I am going to be revising them to reflect, what we're talking about using newer protocols. And I think the other thing that really, for me, was interesting, I was almost starting to, coming from an enterprise application, a strong enterprise application background, it's sometimes hard to see other areas like the data to data integrations. And with this happening now, it becomes clearer why those are important. We just can't ignore them going forward.
Okay. And it's live now, right? You guys are in flight. You're teaching?
We're teaching. We're in flight. We've had our first class on Monday. It's still early in the course, if anybody's interested, but right now we're almost near capacity. And I think what's really interesting with people is that we're able to offer the principles behind stuff, and that's really hard to find. I think it's really in contrast to a lot of vendor courses, which are, here's how you use our specific technology, right? And it gives people like other insights, especially architects and senior dev engineers, on how to do things.
Great. Sounds good.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah,
great discussion today. Is there anything else we've missed today? Any other comments before we call it a day, Kevin?
No, I don't think so. I think we made it around the subjects we were talking about.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to next time, and I'm really interested to see, it's always a surprise. I think things are moving so quickly. So till next week, everyone, comment below, share what you have, your thoughts, especially around AI architecture, where you think it's going, how it's going to support the rise of things like agentic technologies and other things. We'd love to hear your comments. Thanks again, Kevin. Have a great day.
You bet. Thanks, Bryce. See you, everybody.
Cheers.